What's up?
Ah, this book.
Yeah, big week here at the Sad Boys Book Club. The book, I have to say, and I'm sure I've said this every episode, but I cannot stress enough how much how much I'm really enjoying this book this time around.
Yes, welcome. Join me. Bask in the glow of the expanse. It's so comfy here.
Take the expanse pill.
Yes. Don't worry when your eyes get replaced by weird crystalline monster eyes. It's fine. It's part of the plan.
Trust the plan.
Welcome to Sad Boys Book Club. My name is Dusty.
And I'm Daniel.
And this is Caliban's War Part 3. We are covering the third quarter of this book.
Yeah.
Roughly, more or less.
Yeah, we're cutting it up into roughly 150 page chunks.
Yeah, and this was the hardest part to put down.
Yeah.
And I mean that, like, while reading it, being like, oh man, I just want to keep reading this. And then also getting to where we stopped for the week and being like, are you kidding me? I gotta put this down now? Even
I think this is you know how last week we said we weren't like dismissive or negative of it, but we did say that it felt like it became fashionable in the last 15-ish years to kind of like move stories, so like, or the writing advice has become such that they really recommend putting like a big narrative hook at the beginning of the book to get people like to commit to reading the book, which, you know, fair enough. I fully understand the merits of it, but it kind of like necessitates a more a slower second part. You know what I mean? And I think that we definitely felt that in this book, but you know, we're coming back into part 3. It's really peaking here.
Yeah. And I feel like this whole like anticipation for the final quarter is made even worse from the fact that I've had the flu for the last week, so we didn't get to record last weekend, which means I have been sitting on not being able to read this book for the last week. And that's torturous to me. I'm just like, I just want to know.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I there's a lot of times, and I'm sure we'll get to them, but there was times when I was reading, I was very interested to hear some of your takes on some of this as we go along.
Yeah. Well, you came to the right place.
Sad Boys Book Takes.
Yes. Where we left off was Holden and the crew had just dealt with the proto-molecule monster soldier, and it left the incendiary grenade behind, and it detonated, knocking Prax unconscious. That's where Holden and the crew and Prax were left. I think where we left with Avasarala and Bobby was Bobby finding Soren having been going behind Avasarala's back and like you know, doing dealings with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where we've left them. Yeah, this part definitely has a lot more meat to it than I would say probably the previous two. I'd say this is probably the densest section we've covered so far.
I think that's fair to say.
A lot happens, even for Avasarala and Bobby. Well, kind of. I could probably still summarize their section. I'm going to throw a little mild spoiler here, too, but we've hit the point in the book where the storylines have finally converged. And by the end of this section, all four perspective characters are on the Rocinante. Which you're probably thinking, how the hell did Bobby and Avasarala make it on the Rocinante? Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, you'll find out. And also, I'm not glad you asked. Why are you listening to this and having not read the book? What is wrong with you? What are you doing here? Go read Caliban's War after Leviathan Wakes, and then go read Abaddon's Gate after that. Like, do it, dude. Come on. What are you doing? But yeah, I feel like I can still somewhat relatively quickly summarize Bobby and Avasarala's plot up until they get onto the Roci, because outside of the plot point that gets them onto the ship, it's still just more just kind of political maneuvering and playing the game. and it's really great when you're reading it, and it's a lot of fun character writing and world building for the politics of the UN, but it's just not really. I don't think it's really fun to kind of talk about unless you want to like pick out like very specific sequences, because it's just like, and then she called her boss, and then they talked about Venus, and then she went and talked to Bobby, and she asked Bobby about her feelings, and it's like, it's really good reading, but it's not really good retelling.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just as a point of clarification, because we are on a little bit. We had a quick hiatus because of your illness, but was the Soren firing section, did that happen during this portion, or did that happen during the week 2 portion?
I think that's the first chapter that we read this last time.
Okay.
I think the first thing we read was an Avasarala chapter that was dealing with the Soren thing.
Okay, that's right.
But yeah, Soren gets to her first, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Bobby is not actually Bobby. She's a spy, and this is her real name, and she's been undercover this whole time." And my first thought when I'm reading that, and granted, this is coming from an omnipresent reader who knows the truth.
Omniscient.
I don't want to say omniscient, because we don't know everything. We only know what's been told to us, but we know more than the characters because we are in the minds of multiple characters. But because we live in Bobby's mind for, I'm going to be generous and say a quarter of the book, even though I'm pretty confident that her section of the books has been less than a quarter total. We know the truth, but yeah, I love Soren's plan. Like, it's just so out there, and it requires Avasarala to just not think about it at all, take him at face value, not question her about it at all, act really reactionally and emotionally, and like all of these, just it requires her to not be her in order for Soren's plan to work. And I'm just reading it, and I'm like, dude, how do you expect this to go, like, realistically?
There's some this is one thing that I had some interesting thoughts about, and I'm going to wrap this into something else later, but it felt a little fast, for that exact reason. It's like it felt a little like half-baked, and it was kind of, it seems like it was based on some assumptions on the part of Soren that just do not jive with the reality of what we've read, where he kind of pictured himself as like this sort of like completely untouchable guy that had Avasarala's like full and total buy-in, and yet she sees through this in like a matter of moments. And maybe there is a certain veracity to this idea of him having her full buy-in, or if not her full buy-in, she has a profound knowledge of Soren. And I think that was his undoing, because like at first she was kind of, I remember, she was kind of going with it, and then she like sees like what can be best described as a tell, and then she was like, oh. And then at that point, she kind of 180'd on it, and basically ended up excoriating him and then firing him immediately.
Yeah, and it's and I think the reason for it is because Bobby, she's a straight shooter. She told him straight up that she's gonna tell on him. And she's massive. She's a Martian soldier. She's really tall. She's super muscular. She's a powerhouse. So what's he gonna do to her realistically? What can he do to her? So I feel like this kind of slapdash thing was just the best he could do within the timeline that he was given.
Well, but he was also in communication with the war faction, for lack of a better name.
Yeah.
And that's partly why he was doing it, was to sort of, I guess, get Avasarala, if not on the war faction, at least have her somewhat neutralized in terms of being able to work the peace angle with Mars.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, she sees through it and she fires him after she makes him think that she believes him and has him go and make her another pot of tea. That's something we haven't talked about. He's because he's basically her. I feel like saying he's her understudy would be a little too generous, but I feel like that's the kind of best word I have for
She's
it right
like
now.
her assistant.
Yeah, something kind of more
Like a
akin to
Senate
that.
page, maybe. Kind of closer to that.
Yeah, so he makes her a lot of tea. It's just kind of a thing that happens here and there. But yeah, I love how just kind of to really dig it in, she has him make her another cup of tea because she thinks he makes really good tea. But yeah, Bobby comes in and tells her the truth, and she believes Bobby because she knows that Soren's lying to her. And I love this bit here where it's like this relationship that's grown between Avasarala and Bobby to where they're on technically they're on two different sides of this war, but they're the only people that they can trust that they know right now because they know where their alliances are and know what that they both do want the same thing. So it's like, you're technically by all legal classifications my enemy, but like you're also kind of the best person I can have with me right now. And I love that dynamic. It's really well done.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think there's a very genuine bond forming between the two of them.
Yeah, there is a very like strong. I don't want to say necessarily like maternal bond, but it is like there is like you can definitely see like a growing sense of like affection between the two of them.
Yeah, which speaking of a maternal bond, which I do agree, I don't think it is necessarily maternal. I really liked the bit where when she's talking to Bobby and she says how she reminds her of her daughter when she was like really angry and tells the story of after her son died and her daughter was doing the dishes and her hands were bleeding because she just kept scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing, but she wasn't noticing because that's how she was dealing with the grief.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that bit. That was such a really great moment between Avasarala and Bobby.
Yeah, yeah, that was very good, and I don't know. It was. I thought that was one of the more emotionally effective portions of the book. Not to say that it's bad ever, but it's there was something there's some real meat there, and there's some real reality to that.
Yeah. And this section just further what's the word I'm looking for? Like it reinforces my opinion. It reinforces a good word. Yeah, and this section just further reinforces my opinion that Avasarala is the best new character in this book.
She's really good. I'm pretty sure I've been on record so far talking her up, but I don't know. She's really good. She's really interesting. I think, and it's a shame that her portions don't always make for the best radio, so to say. Maybe that's this we could kind of like in the final episode we could do like touch on some things about her, but either way, like she is a very good character, very interesting character. I really like her vantage point. Like the things that she wants are very easy to root for. Not that that's necessarily something that you absolutely must have, but it's a I don't know. It just makes I don't know. She's a very likable and accessible character, and was definitely a very very strong addition to the broader Expanse series.
I'm using this comparison very loosely because she is not at all similar in terms of character personality traits, but in terms of just a very broad comparison, she's the Ned Stark of the Expanse.
Well, this series is compared to A Song of Ice and Fire.
I can't imagine why.
I don't know why, but on the back of my book it says, "This is the Expanse is the Song of Ice and Fire of sci-fi," or something like that.
Yeah, I really loved how many sections talked about the spread of food that they had on the Rocinante. Pages upon pages of Holden just describing all the food he had, and he's like, "Hey, Praxidike, look at this delicious gourmet feast that I've made for you." And by the way, let me tell you about the time that Naomi and I had sex.
Well, I will say that they did kind of do that in the first book, but they kind of in an inverse way. They're like, he was eating the cube of nutrients. It was very cube-like, but not very tasty. I remember they went into like weirdly expansive detail about that at one point or another, and I remember us commenting on that, but not at all in this book so far, with the exception of like he had some coffee and it was good. She drank some tea and she really liked it.
Yeah, it's the coffee that's getting the focus in this one. It's almost every Holden chapter. There's got to be some reference to coffee.
This guy's he's pulling a Dale Cooper on us.
Yeah, but hey, Daniel, maybe that's why they call this series The Expanse. But yeah, it is unfortunate though, because like we've said already, it really is hard to just really go in and talk about a lot of these Avasarala sections in depth and in detail, because it really does just mostly boil down to she talks about her personal life or her character arcs or developments or whatever, or they talk about political things, and it's really really good reading. I really want to stress that the reading is fantastic. While you're going it, you're like, at least I am super engaged in the plot, like love it. I've never turned the page and seen her name on the chapter and been like, damn it, no. I've done that with so many books that I love, even like I've read the Ice and Fire books multiple times, and there are plenty of perspective characters in Ice and Fire that I'll turn the page and I see their name and I'm like, shit, damn, it's gonna be one of these kinds of chapters. Why can't I get another Tyrion chapter? Those are fun. Bran is one of the biggest offenders, by the way. Bran, Sansa, Arena Martell, or Ariana Martell. It's been a long time. I'm sorry, and she wasn't in the show, so most people don't know her.
This is an anti-Bran podcast. This is the Bran hate podcast. We are anti-Bran, anti-Martells, just in general. Just
I'll tell you who didn't have a better story than Bran the Broken. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss.
Got him.
Oh, yeah, we're going back to 2019, fools. Ooh. It's okay. I'm a Game of Thrones hipster. I hated that show since season 4. But to kind of start rounding off the first bit of Avasarala and Bobby's storyline, so Avasarala, she kind of realizes through a number of things at this point, including Soren's betrayal, that I think it happened in the last part that she learned that she's kind of been played a little bit, right? Like we learned that in the second quarter, right?
I believe so. I think there was kind of the stirrings of that then.
Yeah. So now she feels truly alone in terms of like in this political game. The only person she really has is Bobby, who is not really somebody that you can realistically rely on unless violence is required, or
she has negative political capital, essentially.
Yeah, or violent deterrence is required, because ain't many people gonna be standing up to Bobby realistically. So Ehrenreich tells her that it would be in her best interest to travel with Jules Pierre Mao, Julie Mao's father, from Mao Kwiatkowski, to Ganymede for a relief aid run. And she's put in a position to where, and she relays this to Bobby, and she's like, this is just how the game is played. If I don't go, they might as well shoot me, because Bobby's like, this is a trap, they're just trying to kill you, and she's like, no, that's not how this is played. They're not trying to kill me. They're just trying to basically make me as useless as possible without having to kill me. And if I refuse to go on this, they might as well shoot me, because I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be useless. Like they will have won. So I basically have to go, because I have to play their game. But you know what? We'll figure it out. So they're going to have to go on this ship to Ganymede. But she has a plan in place of her own to help kind of get a little bit of an upper hand herself on it, because this is Aaron Wright's way of trying to take her out of the game so that she can't interfere with the Warhawks making war and trying to just, have their giant dick measuring contest with Mars, because you gotta fight the enemy so that you're weakened and depleted for the devil you don't know on Venus when he's ready to show up, because that makes perfect sense. Why not?
This is not even Chekhov's gun. It's like Chekhov's evil sentient planet.
Yeah, imagine if you're playing Mass Effect and you're playing Mass Effect 2 and your main storyline, the main plot of Mass Effect 2 is basically, hey, it'd be really great if we went and killed all the Turians, Asaris, and Solarians. Oh, there's Reapers coming? Yeah, well, it'll be a lot easier to deal with those Reapers if we kill the Turians first. So why don't you just go and kill the Turians, because we won't need them when the Reapers show up, right? It's something like that, and it's like you this is so short-sighted. This is so stupid, and it's just it's to the point now to where this feels like some pretty clear political commentary, where instead of the U.S. and the Middle East, it's the UN and Mars, and then you have the Belters who are just kind of like, yeah, we're just happy to be here, guys, and it's I feel like there's some pretty clear political commentary with modern allegories to the world as it was in 2012, but it's just showing that we've now stopped focusing on making wars with each other based on a line on a map on the planet. Now it's planets on a map in a solar system. That's where the lines are drawn, and it's I don't understand. Everybody knows what's going on Venus. Everybody knows what the proto-molecule does. And I know that the UN created these proto-molecule soldiers that we've been seeing throughout the story. Sorry, minor spoilers. The UN's been creating them. We learned this in this part, and they are sending them out to test them, to try and control them and whatnot. And I'm assuming the plan, the long-term plan for that is if they can control the proto-molecule, then they don't have to worry about Venus. But it's you're still taking a major gamble here, because if you fail, you're just letting Venus just walk all over you if it comes out and becomes a major threat. You're just giving up, basically, because you're shooting your shot at your opponent's goal and hoping that their goalie kicks it into your goal. It's so stupid. These people are stupid. So they leave, and they're working their way to Ganymede on this super luxurious pleasure cruise, basically, because Jules Pierre Mao is a show off, because he's one of the richest men in the galaxy, because of course he is. But he's leaving. She originally she was under the impression that he was going to travel with them to Ganymede. And as they stop as they're getting ready to go, he's like, "Oh yeah, no. Something pressing has come up, and I have to leave." And Officer Ella's like, "All right, so Bobby, we're gonna be taking the ship over, because I have a feeling that things are gonna not go well for us. And there's this really nice, convenient little law where if you do not listen to your political attendees' demands, if you don't go with their demands, because I guess they technically outrank you, then you are illegally holding them against their will, and that they have the power to commandeer the ship."
Well, I think it feels like it's less that and more like they are kind of the people under Mao are what their intentions are here. They are, in fact, it is kind of a soft kidnap. It's because she is being held in the ship in this very intentionally in this slow moving kind of situation, to kind of keep her out of range of or out of contact with the brewing conflict. So it's essentially like imprisonment, but without the name, essentially.
Yeah. And so she kind of planned for this and prepared for it by making sure that she was able to track down and recover Bobby's marine power armor suit. So that's with them. And when it finally does happen, she's trying to send a... well, to kind of get to back up a little bit before we get to that point, she's constantly being under surveillance. She's doing like fake coding messages that just kind of throw them for a loop. And she's got this bodyguard, this personal bodyguard, and his men there for her protection, as well as Bobby. I forgot his name, but he's really cool, and I like his character.
Was it something like Cortayar or something like that?
Something like that.
Probably badly butchered the pronunciation, but...
So she's got that, and basically she discovers, and we'll get to this with Holden's story, but she figures out where Holden and his crew are and where they're going, and there's something that Holden did that we'll get to that's been broadcast, and now because of what Holden broadcasted, again, the UN has disengaged some ships from Ganymede and are putting them on a course to the Rocinante to destroy it. And so she wants to send a message to Holden, and they're not allowing her to use their tight beam laser to contact anybody. And that's when she's like, all right, you're holding me against my will. Bobby, take the ship. And we have Bobby take the ship. It's cool. I like it.
Yeah, that was a really interesting action sequence, kind of like of her suiting up, getting in the armor, and then kind of working her way through the ship as they try to stop her. It's pretty cool because I don't know. It's one of those situations where, I mean, obviously they're the constraints of like firing weapons within a moving spaceship. And she's also trying to not kill any of the guards, and I don't know. It's a really interesting and kind of fun sequence as she kind of works her way through the ship.
Yeah, it's our first real Bobby action sequence since like chapter 1.
And even that was not much of an action sequence. It was like,
an action
crap, what is that monster? I'm gonna shoot at it and then get like wrecked. Get like thrown into the air and then fall and get knocked out.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was fun. She may or may not have killed some people. Doesn't really matter. She kind of tried not to, but they didn't really give her options. But
she did the Kiryu / Batman.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, they take the ship, and Avasarala has her plan. Like, well, she now has control over the ship, and she wants to get her message to Holden. And a really great, I don't want to call it an Easter egg because it does become a plot device. So it's not so much an Easter egg so much as it's a callback. It's a plot device that's a callback. What is attached in the ship bay, one of the ship bays, is none other than Julie Mao's, what's it called, the panache? The pinnace. Her little racer ship that she loved so much that they threatened to sell in Leviathan Wakes if she didn't come home. The Razorback, that's what it was called.
The Razorback, yes.
Yeah. I was like, oh wow, that's so cool. There it is. We had Miller had so many thoughts about that Razorback, and then we never saw it, and look, there it is. So that was really cool. I loved seeing that.
Yeah, it was interesting. I wonder if it will have any major plot relevance later, or if it was just a little bit of just more of a callback here.
Well, we'll find out, but let's hop over to Holden and Prax before we converge on these two two storylines. So yeah, where we left Holden and the crew, the bomb just detonated and things are unstable. So they have to just kind of quickly assess the situation, and do essentially a quick fix to get them stabilized and ready to make it back to Tycho. So they do that. It's not as bad as it could have been, and there were some like really lucky breaks that I'm really wanting a little bit of a. I'm hoping there's going to be a bit of an explanation for, because he goes down into the reactor core, and there's some shrapnel in the wall that came from the complete opposite end of the room, and the only way it could have gone from its original resting place into the wall where it landed was going through the reactor core, but it didn't. It looks like it had somehow arced around it in some way, and it's come up twice in this section when Holden sees it for the first time, and when they get to Tycho and the repair chick Sam is talking about it. She's like, yeah, that thing either boomeranged around or your reactor core learned how to duck. So I'm really wondering if that's going to be something relevant, because it was brought up twice, very, very specifically. Like, that was weird. So I don't know, but yeah, they get the ship in a suitable to travel state and make their way to Tycho Station. There's still a lot of tension between Holden and Naomi because of how he's been acting, and how he's like, Fred did it. There's no way Fred didn't do it. They get Prax. He's needs a little bit of medical attention, but he's fine. Holden will be fine as well. So here's the thing. When they're on Tycho Station, and they do the video package thing that we'll talk about in a minute, they mention that it's been 4 months since Ganymede, which means that it took them like almost 4 months to get from Ganymede to Tycho.
Really?
That's my assumption, because maybe not.
There's no way.
Maybe not the full 4 months, because it has been 4 months since May was taken, since Ganymede went down. When they're on Tycho. Yeah, it has been 4 months since then. Most of that had to have been travel time. I do not
remember that at all.
Yeah, it's in the video package. It's like 4 months ago, his daughter was taken.
Huh. That's weird.
Yeah.
I just totally did not remember it.
Yeah, so that's my thought process. Is it had to be at least 2.5 months of them traveling back to Tycho, because it's not like they arrived on Ganymede like the next day after it, or like a week after. There had to have been some time between. And Prax was doing his whole scavenger hunt thing, and waking up, doing this, then going through his motions and whatnot. So it was probably at least a couple of weeks by the time that the crew of the Rosie made it to Ganymede after the situation went down. But it's 4 months later by the time they're back on Tycho. And I was like, wow, man. Like, I know that there is a lot of time progression in this series. There was a decent amount in Leviathan Wakes, but it's just weird to think about just how quickly that time just kind of flies by in the book.
See, I don't like that. I like Star Wars rules where it's just like, it's like it just happens, or it's like a day or 2 days. To me, I don't know why, but it's just I know it's more realistic or whatever, but it's just a pet peeve. It's like, what do you mean it was 4 months? No, it wasn't. That was like 4 pages ago.
Yeah, I feel like it gives the universe depth.
It's a false depth. It's just like, oh wow, it's big. Okay, so what is that? That functionally does not really do much. Anyway. We don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but for some reason that's one of my reading pet peeves, and maybe why I blocked it out.
No, I get that. But I just thought that was interesting. But before we get too deep into that bit there, so yeah, they make it back to Tycho, and Holden confronts Fred about everything. He's like yelling at him, and Fred
I
keeps.
was cringing this whole time.
It's yeah. It was just like when Miller did the same thing in Leviathan Wakes, and before he knew who Fred was, then he was like, oh shit, sorry, I didn't know who you were.
I was gonna say I'd forgotten that. That does lend credence to the Millerization of Holden.
Yeah. But yeah, he has this big blow up on Fred, and Fred's basically just he pulls a "Who do you think you are? I am" on Holden, and
Which
honestly,
is absolutely fair.
it is. I was gonna say Holden absolutely deserves this verbal beatdown that Fred gives him, and he fires Holden and the crew, and he's like, you know what? I've been having to deal with your self-righteous bullshit for over a year and a half now, and you're only allowed to do these things because I allow it, and you're ungrateful, you're an asshole, and you know what? I don't have to deal with you anymore. So consider the repairs that we're doing on your ship for free, by the way, a severance package, but you're done. And that actually is a major weight off of Holden's shoulders, and he's thinking for the first time in a long time he feels really good about it. But as he's leaving, Fred's like, I didn't do it, by the way. I didn't release the proto-molecule. But I love how he kind of says what I was saying the other day, where he's like, he basically says to Holden, you honestly truly believe that I have the only sample of the proto-molecule in the universe, you child? Are you serious right now? Do you know what the odds are of that?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, Holden, geez, come on. Like, there's a very, very good possibility that was not the only surviving sample. Like, come on, man. But yeah, after he's like kind of calmed down a second as Holden's leaving, he's like, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. So we, at least for now, can close that book. That I feel like you and I had already closed at this point.
Yeah. I will say this was very disappointing for me, not from a writing perspective. I'm not saying that, because there are some truly hard-headed people out there in this world, but I was very disappointed that Holden was not chastened by this, but rather was happy about it. I was like, I was very annoyed with him on a personal level. Not necessarily as a storytelling choice, but it's just like, come on, dude, you need to take some sort of accountability or some lesson from what you just did, and you're just like, oh, I'm so relieved. It's just like, well, it was a little bit annoying to me.
Well, that kind of the lesson is that he realizes, like, that a lot of the bad that he's been doing is coming from the stress of being under Fred's thumb. And once he realizes that Fred's thumb is now off of his shoulders, that weight is gone, and he now actually feels like he can breathe. And this is what leads to his character shift back into more of what we knew him as in Leviathan Wakes.
I can see that argument, but I also think that he needs to be under Fred's thumb. I'm still pretty anti-Holden, and I think somebody really needs to be like, holding his feet to the fire, some sort of like, because otherwise he's a little. And there, to be fair, there is kind of an interesting way of that happening that we can maybe talk about a little bit later that develops. But just to me, he's just too much of a loose cannon, and I just need to see him kind of button down a little bit, get. I don't know. He has annoyed me from the very beginning. So it was nice to see that at first in this book it felt like, okay, now he's doing something worthwhile. He's not just freelancing and just he's committed himself to what I would consider a good political project in terms of protecting the sovereignty and security of the outer planet, kind of the Belters, being part of that political project versus just being a freelancer.
I mean, I can see that.
But that's neither here nor there. Well, there is one other thing that happens when they disembark, though, when they get to Tycho, that I think we should talk about.
Sure. Yeah, so Naomi has, like I said earlier, the tension has been building, and she leaves, and Amos and Alex are both all just kind of like, hey, do we need a new XO? And he's like, I don't know. No, maybe, I'm not sure. It just kind of depends. And they're like, we don't want a new one. We want her. And he's like, I do too. Not even from a relationship standpoint, but from she's just real damn good at her job, and we need her. And there's this bit where, they kind of Holden kind of comes to realize, and I think this is another catalyst to his character de-regression, where he realizes basically through Alex, we have a really nice Alex moment, believe it or not, that because Alex is like, how much do we get paid? And he's like, we have a joint bank account, and if you guys, a quarter of it is yours if you want the money. I've never skimmed you guys on money if you needed it. Money's been going into the ship for all of us, but other than that, everything that is in there is split equally 4 ways. And he's like, yeah, but that's not my point. We're not here because we get paid for it. If we wanted to get paid, we just leave and go join get a real job basically on another ship. We're here because we love it here, because we're family, because that's we love each other and we love working with each other. This is what we consider home. That's why we're here. And he's like, Naomi is a part of that, so she needs to be a part of that, otherwise we're lost. And it was a really, really, really nice moment to actually be like, and I'm Alex. And it's like, yes, you are. Yes, you are, Alex.
I always knew he was a good character. There was something good there, but it was just nice to have confirmation of that in that moment.
Yeah. So Naomi is staying with Sam, the mechanic, and keeping her distance from Holden because she's still not entirely sure what she's going to be doing moving forward either. But meanwhile, Prax is staying with Amos in whatever kind of hole they're holed up in right now.
In a pseudo capsule hotel.
Yeah. And he's worried because, no progress on finding his daughter. And so he's looking to hire basically a PI to help find her, but he can't afford it. And he asked his ex-wife for money, and she sent him what little she could, but it just wasn't enough. And then this is when Holden comes in to the apartment that or not the apartment, but the capsule room hole that him and Amos are in. And Amos is like, dude, like, what are you doing? We told you we're gonna find her. Why are you looking for other people to find her when we already told you we're going to? What are you doing, man? And like Holden comes in and he's asking like what's going on, and he's just like, yeah, I don't have the money to do it. And he's just, he's like, I've already asked the people I can, and it's just not enough. He's like, who else could I ask for? And Holden's just like, how about everybody? And the plan that he comes up with is he's going to do one of his famous Holden tell-alls to the universe. But this time it's not going to be about Mars or the protomolecule or anything. Well, I mean, it is kind of about the protomolecule actually, but it's more so about this is Praxidike Meng, and his daughter was taken in the Ganymede incident. And here's the footage we have of that. And if you have any information, or if you would like to throw some money his way, basically they create a GoFundMe for Prax, and they create this nice little video package for it and send it out, and it works really, really, really well. Almost immediately, Prax gets way more than enough money to pay the Rocinante crew for this job in an official, relatively official capacity.
Yeah. This is an interesting kind of thing, and we can kind of get back to it. But I have some thoughts about this portion that kind of tie into a lot of my thoughts about what happens on Tycho.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, we need one more thing to happen, and then I can wrap a bunch of different episodes up or a bunch of different moments up in a bow about why I don't like this.
You talking about with Naomi?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, which he gets where Naomi is from Amos, and he goes to the bar that she's at, and they have their talk, and it's basically he's just like, "You're right, you were right. I kind of suck. I've been sucking, but you know what? It's cool. I got fired." And she's like, "Okay, Holden, I'm reducing this a lot. I really am being super reductive with this explanation, but it's basically just him being like, you were right. I suck." And she's like, "This is a good start. I love you, but we're not fully back there yet. But this is a good start."
Yes. So I'll just go ahead and throw my thoughts in here now. It's too tidy. All of this is too tidy. Holden and Naomi are broken up for a chapter and a half before she forgives him and comes back onto the Rocinante. The man gets money from donations. He goes viral essentially, and then with a GoFundMe, and gets mad donations to the point where he's able to fund this adventure 4 times over. For some reason that sticks with me, but I think it was something like that. And then combine this with the way that the Soren situation occurred, where it was it happened, and then the payoff was so quick in all of these instances where the bad thing was avoided. Soren's treachery was immediately sniffed out. The money problem was immediately solved. The relationship problem lasted a chapter and a half. Essentially, I think so. It's just the payoffs. It's all too tidy. The payoffs are coming too quick, and it just obliterates any sense of stake that any of those problems have. And I don't think it drags down the book as a whole. There's still a lot to like about the book, especially with what to come, and even things that happen during this portion, like we've talked about, and I've been very positive on. But this part, the Tycho Station part, and the coupled with the Soren thing, really irked me, and it feels like either, I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it was a situation where there was just too many plot points, and they really had to wrap it up within a certain number of pages, and things got cut way down. But I will say all of these things really stuck in my craw here.
I mean, I don't mind it too much because I feel like these are mostly just kind of setups to get us to the finale, and it's just, I guess, minor character problems in order to just kind of set up the final situation. Because I mean, to be fair, I feel like of all the things you're mentioning, the most believable one is James Holden making a personalized video package for a man and it going viral.
That's fine, but it's just all of those things happening, it's just a little too convenient. And it also just it's not that it's just convenient. It's just that when the solution occurs in such close proximity to the problem, that you vaporize the stakes. We're back to Chewbacca death fake out. It's not that bad, but it is kind of this should be the loss of Naomi, or the loss of the relationship with Naomi rather, should provide some sort of emotional through line, to Holden, to kind of bridge him from Miller Holden back to good guy Holden, essentially. That should be that there should be some sort of development of the relationship with himself, with the crew, and particularly with Naomi. But there's not really a lot of growth there. As you say, it's reductive, but it is also very true that he was just hey, Naomi, actually you were right about everything. Please come back. And then she's immediately comes back. And after it's just I don't know. it just does not work from for me. All of those beats. It just I feel like functionally they could have not existed at all.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's not so much that she's just like, okay, we're back together and everything's fine again. It's their relationship is now starting to become, it's on the mend. It's not repaired. It's on the mend, and she's agreeing to return to the Rocinante because, regardless of what happens between him and her, because he's like if we're done, whatever. Like I it sucks and I don't want it to be, but I can live with that. I need you on the Rocinante for more than just because I'm in love with you, but it's because you're the XO. You're just as much a part of this family as Amos and Alex. So like we need you on the ship. So she agrees to come back to the ship, and granted, here pretty soon their relationship does get fully repaired, but at this point in time, it's only like it's on the path to being repaired. It's not fully repaired. She's like I said, she says this is a good start, and she still, I mean, she never not loved him, and she even says I love you, but like this isn't enough. You have to show more, but you're on the right path.
But he doesn't really show more, like, until I don't remember, because I've read a little bit in the last couple of days. I don't know if this is in part 4 that we'll be covering next time, or within this part. But it's just too easy. It just there's not really a lot of, I don't know. It doesn't really seem like he has to do that much. It just seems like it's there's like a couple awkward conversations, like, oh, she wasn't looking at me. She always used to look at me, or oh, she's being a little more formal and professional, whereas before she was kind of like relaxed. And then like immediately we're back into like where they were, and then beyond even the end of the last book. So it just, I don't know. It's not that I'm not okay with it ending up there. It's just like I feel like this needed to happen earlier and be more of a driving force, not something that just it honestly can essentially just get hand waved, at least in my opinion.
I can say through experience that sometimes some what seem like major relationship problems can be fixed with just a conversation.
I mean, that's true, but that doesn't make for good writing.
Well,
that doesn't
not.
make for interesting writing, at least.
But to be fair, though, if I remember correctly, and this is kind of to your point, I think the only thing that kind of like takes them from on the mend to repaired is his, I think it's the who are we speech that he gives the crew when they get back on the ship. I think it's that's the thing where she's like, okay, meet me in bed upstairs, and he's like, whose bunk? And she's like, what do you mean whose bunk?
Yeah, so there was something like the point. Yeah, that all of that to say, it's not. I'm not saying that the book is bad. It's just all of these little plot conveniences. I would rather, if they're not going to have like really like a lot of meat to them, I think it would have been better to just focus on other, longer term things that will have a bigger sense of emotional payoff for the reader. At least that's just my rate on it.
Yeah, I don't think the plot points were big enough to spend any more time on them than they already did. Because the getting money,
and that's fine. But like if that's the case, they shouldn't be there. Like all of these plots, they need to feel weighty. They need to feel like they matter.
Yeah, and I mean the Naomi thing is something that has been building since the start of the book. And granted, yeah, the consequences of them are very short-lived, but I just don't have a problem with that personally.
It's just, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like there was like, it feels like it was like pretty much like at the same level. It was for a long portion of the book. Then there was like this big rupture, and then it's back to better than ever. Within the space of like 2 chapters, in a book that's like 40-50 chapters, and that's it's
You
just, in my opinion, if for these things, they, especially when it comes to character relations that are like this important, you need a bigger pop, and this was just like a little bit of a roadblock, a speed bump, when it should have been like a full, should have had more reverberations.
you putting it this way reminds me of the bit in Bruce Almighty where he gets his job back and he's talking to his boss and he's telling him about how he like did this like massive spiritual finding of himself and reassessed his priorities and all of these other things, and his boss is just like, "You did all that in a day?" And he's like, "Imagine what I could do with 7." It just reminded me of that little bit.
That's kind of funny.
That's a great movie. It still holds up, by the way. I watched it last year.
In quite a few years.
Yeah, you should watch it sometime. It might still be on Netflix. It still holds up. It was good. Just don't watch Evan Almighty.
Oh, well, that was the sequel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that one at all.
It's a waste of Steve Carell, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, with the whole Prax thing, like, yeah, he's making like a lot of money, and it has it's like any other crowdsourced kind of thing where people can leave comments, but it more than just comments, they can also send like little video responses because it's the future. And Prax, his whole storyline at this point right now is just, and then I read some more comments, and then I watched some more responses, and then I read some more comments, which it's a little tedious if I'm being honest, but we do learn something major. Someone does respond to him saying, "Hey, I know the person you refer to as Dr. Strickland, but that's not what his name is." He's like, "I used to work with him." So he starts a bit of a correspondence with this guy, and the guy's like, "Yeah, I used to work with him at this university," and I forgot what his actual name was, but basically he thought he was like the hottest shit that ever came out of an ass, but he actually was just hot shit. And he before he could, he basically pulled a "I'm not fired, I quit" on the university, and just spouted off some rhetoric that Holden recognizes as protogen rhetoric. So Holden thinks that this dude is former protogen. And so they have a bit of a lead, and I really like the bit where Prax grabs the whole crew and is like, "Hey, based on all of this information and what we know about," and he basically deep dives the protomolecule soldiers and figures out their weakness and the fact that the incendiary bomb was inside of it as a form of like of just it's a kill switch that the UN can use to destroy them if they lose control of them, because they're trying to control them but they haven't yet. And that's why the one in the first chapter that Bobby fought just suddenly spontaneously combusted, was because of that. And that's why when the one left the ship, it left the bomb behind. That's where the bomb came from. And he's like, it's getting smarter. It's starting to kind of like mentally adapt and evolve to where it's finding ways to get rid of its essentially its controller and become more sentient and able to do what it wants, when it wants, as it wants. And that's super dangerous.
It's reverting back to the normal protomology. It's like trying to get around the engineering that the UN has put on it to kind of prevent it from doing what the protomolecule is. It's getting around its controls and kind of like reverting back to its original form.
Yeah, but like a 2.0 form because of what the UN has done with it.
Yeah.
So that's terrifying, and Prax kind of figures that out, and he's like, because of all of this information, because of all this, their base has to be close to Ganymede, because there's no way that they could do any of this stuff, and with the time frame that it would take for what it seems like these protomolecule soldiers are potentially losing control and need to be terminated, they can't have gone far from their base, so it has to be somewhere close. And the where he ends up tracking it down to is, he's like, it's got to be on Io. That's our best bet. There's no other place their base would be. It has to be on Io. And I gotta level with you. This is some like, this is some good detectiving from Prax. I feel I was like, damn, dude, like, nice job. Like that was some. It was engaging.
It was actually nice. It was good to let Prax have this moment because to a certain extent, he's been, and we made this comparison pretty early on, but like the Michael from Lost character, essentially, he feels that sort of like crazed, desperate parent, lost my child archetype, but now he's finally doing some things that are moving the plot forward in a constructive way, versus just kind of like stumbling into things. So that goes a long way to like. Generally, I think it's better writing to give your characters agency. I mean, well, let me back it up. He did have agency, just make bad decisions. It's easier to and be from a reader's perspective to be invested in the character when they're not like failing at everything they do.
Yeah. And so they have a goal in mind on where they're going to go. But it's somewhere around this point that he starts noticing that he's getting a lot of like super negative comments, like, "Oh, you're sick. You deserve to rot in hell for what you did." And he's like, "Wait, what?" And he looks at the news, and it turns out that his wife is making this response to him, saying that he physically, mentally, and sexually abused May and forced her to abandon May, and it's like her biggest regret. And it's a lie. It's very clearly lies. Like someone from the UN clearly has taken her and coerced her into saying these things about Prax because part of that video package had the proto-molecule in it. And something that we see in Avasarala's story with this going on is because she's like, wow, Holden just said the proto-molecule's on Ganymede again. Thanks, Holden. That's going to create a panic. But like the news cycles for the UN, and Avasarala assumes Mars is doing the same, are just going full smear, being like, oh, that's not the proto-molecule. That's just goo. What an idiot that Jim Holden is. Oh my god, who would believe that fool? What an idiot. And yeah, someone got to Meng's ex-wife and basically had her create these lies to make him look like just the absolute worst human being ever that's exploiting a tragedy for his own personal gain. So it doesn't seem like it's a massive hampering on his Indiegogo, but because I think there's a comment that there's something he thinks about where it's something like for, and it's a relatively small amount of like horrible messages that he gets compared to the positive messages he gets. But also in that vein, there's a bit where with Avasarala where she starts sending out phone calls to people saying like, hey, did you grab that Meng's ex-wife and have her do that? Because like if you did, I want to know who's the one that grabbed her, because that was really fucking stupid and I can't believe you did that, and if you didn't do that, I need to know who. So that was fun. I like that little bit with Avasarala.
Yeah, it was interesting because she has the sort of political moxie that she was able to, and that's something that she kind of has, that we see a lot. We kind of talked about it a little bit on during the Soren revelation, but she has like an almost preternatural Sherlock Holmes-esque ability to like see through political deceptions, and it's kind of even if we may not see the work, so to say, how she comes up with these deductions, it is fun nevertheless to watch her kind of work the political process.
Yeah, which I mean, we
don't shake the trees.
Yeah, which we don't need to see like essentially a proof of concept of her being able to do this, because we've already been given enough context already in the fact that she's an old woman that's been doing this for a long time. So it's like we know she's experienced, and whatever context clues were given from the writing of her, it tells us enough to know that she is incredibly intelligent, incredibly politically savvy, and she knows how to play the game and work the systems to her benefit. So yeah, I don't think it's.
I agree, and it's not necessarily that kind of book, but it's just it's one of those things where it's a nice to have but not mandatory, like to see the clues essentially.
Yeah.
But it's good enough. Like she's a good enough character, and the process work is interesting enough. I say interesting is good and entertaining enough that you can just blow past the clues and all that. It's just one of those things that it's a nice to have but not mandatory, because the character is written in such a way that she's you just buy it, and you're able to you work with it, and you're caught up in following the plot rather than wait, what, how did she come up with that,
Yeah. So now at this point, the crew, they have their plan in place, and now they're heading to Io to start the finale. And Avasarala at this point, that's when she knows that the destroyers have broken off from Ganymede on an intercept course for the Rocinante, and that's when she's like, we need to get into contact with them. And then that's when she has Bobby take control of the ship, and she's like, hey, we need to get to the Rocinante. And Bobby's like, there's no way this luxury cruiser is going to be able to burn fast enough in order to catch up to them. And she's like, okay, well, we need something fast. And Bobby's like, if only there was some racing ship on board that we could use. I don't know, some sort of Razorback or something. And so there we go. That's how Avasarala and Bobby start their collision course with Holden and the crew.
Yeah, that was a nice way to kind of tie, to, as far as we know, kind of put a bow on that sort of that callback.
Yeah. And so Alex, okay, before we get to that, actually, we got to do the who are we thing. But yeah, Holden gives this really big speech to the crew when they all get back together before they leave, and it's the crux of it is the who are we. Like, this whole time we've been working together, we've just been kind of going with the flow of the situation that we've been pulled into, but we're looking at, for the first time ever since we've been together, an actual open possibility. We don't have anyone lording over us, we don't have any jobs, we don't have anything. We are what we want to be from here on out, and if that means we need to go our separate ways, we go our separate ways. But if we want to stay together and try and become mercenaries or freelancers or whatever, this is the time to do it, and this is when we figure out who we are as a crew and what we are doing. And I do really like it. I think it's a really great speech, and it's a great way to kind of, like, I guess, renew the vows of the crew, so to say.
Yeah, and I like this is kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier, like about giving some sort of accountability to Holden, whereas before it was kind of a top down, sort of like coming from the OPA, the reorganization of the crew of the Rocinante to essentially be like how to put this, like a co-op mercenary group, essentially a democratized co-op scenario for like their mercenary group, was, I think, is actually a very interesting way to go forward, and also one of the ways that I think it adds a little bit of, I don't know how quite, but like hope, I guess. It's like a nice thing. It's a very nice moment when the crew comes together and they kind of reaffirm their commitment to one another and to this idea of being these freelancers on the side of good, taking up these good causes and stuff. And then they kind of like they have a show of faith, so to say, in Holden. They essentially re-elect him captain. But they also are like, we want more of a democratic decision making moving forward. And I don't know, it's a nice, I think it's a nice way to sort of, as a Holden skeptic, it was a nice way to balance out the character, but also maintain the structures of the relationship and maybe deepen them somewhat.
Yep, and you know what? He won back the girl.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that happens that shortly thereafter.
Yep, she's like, cool, you want to have celebratory sex? And he's like, you know it. So,
Huh.
yay. But yeah, so he gets woken up from his post-coital respite by Alex saying, "Hey, you're gonna want to come and hear this." And it's a message from Avasarala in the Razorback saying, "Hey, you got a bunch of UN destroyers coming to kill you. Come meet me here." And this is where we finally get all of them coming together. They meet up, and Bobby comes in first, and she's all imposing in her armor, looking down on them like a space marine, and they're all just like, holy shit, what is that? And she's like, yeah, you want to put your weapons away? And they're like, yes, ma'am. And so they meet Avasarala, and Avasarala puts together yet another video package where she's like, I've been graciously welcomed aboard the Rocinante with Jim Holden, where we are discussing ways for the OPA and the UN to come together against to help Ganymede and figure out what's like how to solve these problems and all of this. And she sends it out, and it's a way to kind of take the heat off of Holden, because now she's basically like, what are you gonna do, kill me too?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also from there that she learns the truth of the proto-molecule soldiers from Prax, who basically gives her the rundown that he gave them before. And one thing I will say as well, that's kind of an aside, is I really love the interactions that have happened so far between the crew and Avasarala and Bobby. Like, because Alex is also from Mars, him and Bobby have automatically just kind of like, it's almost like a subconscious. I don't want to use a term as like as like harshest segregation, because that's not what I mean. But they've started to like subconsciously group themselves together away from everyone in certain situations, because they're both Martians. And they have like
it's just because they have a similar frame of reference, similar cultural background. So maybe there's, and they have a general like good rapport. So it just kind of flows from there naturally that they because I think previously Alex was like the only Martian. I think everybody else was either a Belter or from Earth. So it gives him a sort of like. I guess there's a sort of comfort in meeting someone from a similar cultural background.
Yeah, but like I really enjoy the conversations that they've been having, and like the like, it's not so much bonding, but just kind of the information that we're gathering from the two of them, just from their conversations. I don't know, I just really like the interactions that have been happening as these storylines have finally come together. It's fun. Yeah. It's nice. But in response to learning all these things about the proto-molecule monsters, she sends this like massive half-hour long message to Ehrenreich saying, hey, whatever you think you're going to accomplish with these proto-molecule monsters, don't do it. It's not going to work. This is going to backfire. This is going to be a problem, and you are going to regret it. Do not do this. This is a bad idea. And throughout this whole section, Bobby has been like, you're crazy. You're insane. They're going to kill you. They're going to try to kill you. Like, you're walking into an ambush. They're just, you're, why do you not care that you're about to die? And she's just been like, it's fine. That's not how this is played. This isn't how this works. You're overreacting. You don't know what you're talking about. So now, she doesn't ever get a response from Ehrenreich personally, but what she sees is that all of those destroyers that were disengaged once she sent out her little video package with Holden to say, hey, I'm on the Rocinante, when that like kind of like ceasefire that happened with them after that happened, well, that's now gone. They're now coming right back on a collision course with the Rocinante to destroy it, despite her being on it. And I love this. And she goes over to Bobby about that, and she's like, hey, if you were ever going to tell me I told you so, now's the time to do it. And that's where we end for this section.
Yeah, that was overall a very good section. Lots of really interesting plot points. Things starting to heat up. I don't know. This was. I think this we took a little bit longer this time in terms of discussing, but in terms of reading, I think this was far and away my shortest time. It just these pages. It was I was just burning through it.
Yeah, I use an app called Bookly to kind of track my reading. I use it for like stats and like record keeping, and it gives you some like really great information, like your average pages per hour on a book, or just in general for all of your books, because not all books are created equally in terms of how long a page is. But it's a lot of really cool stats, and you start the timer when you start reading, you end the timer when you're done reading, and you type in what page you stopped at. And for this section, it shows like all of your reading sessions and the stats of those reading sessions. And compared to the previous session, there'll either be a green up arrow or a red down arrow to show if your stats are improving or diminishing from your previous session. And almost every single session of this part of the book, it was just nothing but green arrows. Like I was reading it faster and faster and faster because I was getting like more and more and more into it. Which, to be fair, this faster and faster and faster, it was like going from like 1.17 pages per minute to 1.15 pages per minute to 1.12 pages per minute. So it was like minor increases, but I was just getting more and more into it. So I was just kind of like just going quicker and quicker through it because I'm like, oh my god, this is so good. Oh, this is great. And it just became a real page turner. So
yeah, it was I don't know, it was really good, and I think that gets us this time. Really looking forward to wrapping it up next time. Not because I'm not liking it, but because I'm just excited to see how it all ends.
yeah.
But thank you everybody for listening to yet another episode of the Sad Boys Book Club. This is Daniel.
This is Dusty.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care.